Well, it looks like it's 1:02 now. Gil, do you want to start with introductions or give it another minute before kicking that off?
Why don't we, it looks like we have a lot of folks here, so why don't we get started? Welcome everyone to the Puget Sound Regional Council's March 2025 regional meeting for TDM stakeholders, Transportation Demand Management stakeholders. I think what we want to do, we're going to try something a little bit different for these kinds of Zoom kind of meetings, is to kind of start off with a little bit of a round of introductions. You can, we have the all-person chat turned off, but we're going to ask you to, I'll kind of try to call on folks and have a really quick letting us know who you are and who you represent, so we know a little bit, get a little bit of sense of who all's here. I know I recognize a lot of names from the past, but there's also some new folks. So let's just go around the room really quickly. And again, I'll just start off with Gail Cerise, Program Manager at PSRC. Erin, kind of introduce yourself. We'll do the PSRC.
Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Hogan. I'm an associate planner here at PSRC, supporting the TDM work.
And Alexa Leach is always helping support us here. So thank you, Alexa, for being part of this. She's also at Puget Sound Regional Council. And Philip Harris, principal planner here. So he's just waved there. So I'm going to start calling out names. Would you please turn on your camera, turn on your mic, and introduce yourself, name, and who you represent. So starting off with Kim Keeling.
Hi, I'm Kim Keeling, and I am with the City of Redmond, and I do the CTR program for the City of Redmond with all of the affected employers, as well as managing the transportation management programs for all of the affected properties in the City of Redmond.
Thank you. Debbie, I see you have your camera on. Go ahead.
I'm Debbie Germer with Pierce County. Work with major employers here in Pierce County, and we also have TDM corridor projects. Thank you.
Jennifer Haas, Community Transit.
Hi, Jennifer Haas with Community Transit. I manage the innovation team there at our agency, and I'm also a member of the Washington State TDM Technical Committee. So happy to be here.
Thank you. Matthew from Seattle.
Yeah, hey everyone, Matthew Trika here. I am the TDM lead for the City of Seattle.
Thank you. Braden, thanks for turning your camera there.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Braden Kelly. I'm at the University of Washington, and my department administers the CTR. I'm the ETC for the university.
Bree.
Hi, this is Bree Moore. I'm not able to come on camera today, but I'm with the Port of Seattle, and I manage the Port commuter benefits program, and I'm their commuter benefits manager.
Great, thank you. Christopher.
Hello, I'm Chris Andre with the City of Tukwila, and we are TDM implementers for the city, and then we also have some South King County focused TDM work. Thanks.
Thank you. Sherman.
Hello, Sherman Gong here, City of Bothell, managing the CTR program, working with Rayad Turhi on our TDM stuff. Thanks.
Thanks. Lindsay.
Hi, Lindsay Kaipoff, Kitsap Transit, and I'm the Commute Trip Reduction Administrator for Kitsap County.
Welcome. David. We're having a little hard time hearing you, at least I am.
There we go. My mic was up, sorry.
Okay.
David Tomporowski with Port of Seattle, while Bree Moore, who introduced herself, also works for the Port. She is the ETC for the Port as an employer. I am in the aviation division, working specifically for the airport, and I am focused on TTR and TDM for the broader airport workforce, of which the Port is one component, but it's much larger than just the Port. Over 20,000 badged individuals that comprise the airport workforce. Thank you.
Thank you. Ricardo, I think I see you next.
Great. Well, thank you all. Ricardo here from the Public Transportation Division at Washington State DOT. I help administer the CTR program with my colleagues and help support the TDM Technical Committee, the TDM Executive Board, and all you. So good to be here. I'm going to be on mute and have my camera off. I am listening and will happy to take any questions I can, but kind of multitasking right now. Thanks, Gil.
Yeah, sure. Simon. Simon from Sound Transit, I think. Maybe he stepped away. So Simon Tan, I think, is from Sound Transit. We'll move on to Eric Walters.
Oh, sorry. Did you? Okay, I was introducing myself. Okay, so I'm Simon Tan from Sound Transit. Sorry, I missed the prompt there.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a transportation planner. Been Sound Transit for 2.5 years or so, and I work on station area planning.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Eric. You're next.
Hey, I'm Eric Walters. I am the Senior Transportation Planner for Snohomish County. I'm also the administrator for the CTR plan, as well as the ETC for the county.
Great. And we have Tim next. Tim Hams.
Hi there, Tim Hams. I work for King County Metro TDM. I manage the Employee Transportation Program, and I also act as the ETC for King County government.
Thank you. Romulus.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Romulus Fergudas with the Washington State Department of Transportation, and I work here at the Northwest Region TMC. I'm an ITS operations engineer. Great to see you all again.
Great, thanks. Zarina.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zarina Infante, she, her. I'm the program director at Seattle's Transportation Management Association.
Great, welcome. Greta.
Hey everyone, Greta Libert, she, her pronouns, and I'm a project manager at King County Metro on the TDM team.
Great, thank you. Christine, you're next.
Hi everybody, Christine Edens, she, her, King County Metro TDM program lead. Nice to see everyone.
Good to see you. Colton.
Hi everybody, Colton Davis, CTR implementer here at Community Transit.
Welcome. And Sarah, I think this is the last one, but if I miss somebody, we'll get after Sarah.
Hey all, Sarah Spicer here at SDOT. I'm the Transportation Options / TDM Program Manager for City of Seattle.
Great, welcome. And so faces and names moved around on my screen a little bit, so I just want to make sure, did I miss anybody? If I missed you, please speak up. All right, I think I did it. All right, so I think, Aaron, I'm supposed to turn it back over to you. Welcome, everyone. We're going to go over, Aaron's going to go over the agenda. I'm going to come back at some point here, and we'll keep this going.
Okay, sorry. Somehow I lost my screen there for a second. One more time. There we go. Okay. All right, now I can see you and the screen. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate folks joining us today. Just before we get started, quick overview of the procedures for this meeting. Want to let everybody know this meeting is being recorded so we can share it with TDM stakeholders who weren't here today. This is not a formal decision-making group or a formal board of PSRC, but we do want to be able to refer back to all of the great feedback we hopefully hear from you all today. As Gil mentioned, please remember to mute your audio when you're not speaking. You're welcome to leave your video on. If you have a question, please unmute, raise your hand, let us know in some way. We want to hear from all of you. And then also the Q&A feature is on as opposed to the chat. Just that makes it a little easier for Gil and I to both see what's coming in. So if you do have questions or comments that are easier to submit written than verbal, please feel free to do that using the Q&A feature. But we do really want to encourage people to have a verbal discussion here to the extent possible. And finally, there will be a chance, again, please speak up throughout, but if you have any announcements, questions, topics you want to bring up for the good of the order, we will have a roundtable at the end of the meeting to do that. So if there was something you wanted to talk about today that we didn't cover, there will be a chance to do that. Any questions or comments before we jump into our first agenda item? Okay, seeing none. So one of the reasons we're convening at this point in the year, it's been a bit since we last chatted with all of you in August. I know folks have been, especially in CTR affected jurisdictions, very busy working on CTR plans, comprehensive plans. There's been a lot going on, but we are in the process of developing the 2026 Regional Transportation Plan. And something we've been working with the boards, an outcome of that has been this current transportation system report that we're working on this spring. So essentially some of those initial findings from the inventory and kind of laying out the existing system. Traditionally, we've waited and that's come out with the full plan toward the end of the year ahead of adoption, but we wanted to kind of share what we know so far at this point. So we really wanted to convene this group to get your feedback on what we've found for TDM so far, and see if that feels accurate to everybody or if there's something we're missing. So I think I'm turning it back to you, Gil, to give kind of the RTP overview.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. And it kind of gave a little bit of a preview here of what I was going to talk about, just in terms of we do this on a 4-year cycle. That's kind of what's one of the bullets here on this slide. We at the Puget Sound Regional Council, or a metropolitan planning organization, we meet federal and state requirements for long-range planning that allows funding to flow through our region. And so we are required to develop a minimum 20-year planning horizon. And we oftentimes go beyond that to kind of help with the growth management planning. And in this case, we have a horizon year of 2050. We need to update this every 4 years. In part, if you're from another part of the country, some MPOs do it on a 5-year cycle because of air quality conformity issues. We are on a 4-year cycle. I think there's there's a couple of different cycles that can be on there, and because of where we're at in that, we are a 4-year update, which is a fairly frequent update cycle for a long-range plan. We incorporate an integrated multimodal transportation system. We do have one of the most aggressive transit expansions in the nation that is we're doing right now, with multiple transit agencies working together to kind of develop this integrated long-range high-capacity transit system. And then all the work that goes into that for like people connecting, walk, bike, and roll, driving, using scooter shares, things like that, different kinds of mobility on demand, connecting to those transit nodes and developing these regional growth centers. We have to develop a financial strategy over this long range that is considered reasonable. So it can't be really a kind of a pie in the sky kind of assessment. We do a lot of work, and we're in the midst of that work right now, collecting information and data from across the region, getting information from the state over a longer period of time to kind of looking back into the past over a long range, what can we expect in the future? So it doesn't matter in this reasonable financial strategy what we have today or what you're authorized to spend today in terms of tax revenues. What can we expect in the future? And there might be new revenue sources, there might be changes to revenue sources. So that's kind of one of the things that we look at and work with our board. And then we use this document to kind of help us prioritize and identify, and if there's a funding gap, how do we kind of make sure that those new revenue sources or those additional revenue sources come to fruition in the 20-year period. So that'll be actually one of the key things in our regional transportation plan process this year, is really looking at those and really scrubbing those assumptions, because over the last number of years, one of the key things was pricing the system through a road usage charge. And as people know, that's a big issue out there. So that has not happened over the years. We're kind of going back and revisiting that. We're also have had as a ongoing financial gap, local transit service. So even though Sound Transit is funded out for a high capacity transit system, how do you actually fund the local transit service that's going to connect to that? The bus rapid transits, the different types of local transit services, those are in the long range, they are expecting new funding sources that have not been identified. So we need to kind of figure that out. We use the latest available estimates for growth, travel, and economic activity. We do a regional household travel survey on a regular basis to kind of ground truth our models and make sure that we really are looking at how people travel. And I think we'll have a couple of slides here kind of identifying some of the trends in that. And we've shared those in the past with TDM stakeholders over the years. And then we have performance measures and targets to kind of show how the system is performing, how it's performing today, how it's going to be performing in the future based upon our models, and then addressing a number of federal planning factors as best we know what those are these days. So that's kind of what we do cover in our plan, and we do a really good job of like addressing these requirements and kind of more or less exceeding them on a regular basis. So just know that that's all encompassed in this, and it's a very large, complicated task for us to get through every 4 years. Next slide, please. And so here's an overarching, really high-level schedule of what we're doing, and I think this is kind of where Aaron was alluding to. There's not a real big difference here. We sometimes just talk about it differently. We've always start with kind of like updating our regional inventories and like addressing where the existing baseline condition is. It changes over time. You have additional sidewalks and bike lanes. You have additional transit network built out. How much more has been accomplished? How much better or worse is congestion? We kind of work on these current transportation system settings and kind of performance, and are able to kind of share that out as we kind of tells us what gaps are out there today. We engage the public. As you can see in the bottom, there's a lot of public engagement throughout, and we engage the public to kind of help us identify which of these gaps are actually needs that people, transportation needs that are in the system today. We then look out to that future system and make sure what we're looking at is reasonably expected to be funded, develop a model based upon that, model the future conditions, and then kind of develop a draft plan. And our plan adoption, we kind of have this kind of set out so that we pull this together for a plan adoption in May of 2026. That will allow us, there's a timeline associated with these federal and state requirements, and that will allow us to continue receiving those federal funds and those state funds and keep this keep things going in our region. The difference, as Aaron alluded to earlier, like sometimes in the past, and many times in the past, this is, I think, my 4th plan. We kind of do all this work and then just develop a draft plan and people comment on it. We are seeking engagement throughout, but I think the last plan update we did through COVID pandemic, people weren't really as clear that this is like, where are we seeking the feedback? When are we trying to get input on? And so the idea of developing a current transportation system report, we're going to release that at the end of April and have that available for people to look at and comment on. That's an opportunity for people to kind of start to look at this, and is also allowing us to get a little bit of input and feedback on what we're developing in terms of a plan. That would be part of our future plan. But so basically getting a sneak peek of what we're developing here, really looking at the written document, being able to provide input. We could do something like that for the future system development. We don't have a specific plan for our future system conditions. In fact, the way we're developing this, it oftentimes that comes just before the draft plan. So we're trying to kind of like see as best we can where we can pull out information and highlight that and get feedback throughout the process. And in terms of feedback throughout the process, engagement like this here today, where we're getting together with stakeholders on particular important programs and modes for the regional transportation plan, is one of the ways we engage. We're going to have an online engagement hub. We do targeted outreach to populations and communities with accessibility and mobility needs. We're going to be doing tabling. We have we've in the course of doing a regional safety action plan that's going to be adopted next month. We did experiment with and liked what we got out of some community meetings that we developed and kind of organized throughout the region. We're going to have 6 of those in the late summer of this year. And we're also going to have stakeholder and feedback groups and other kind of like, I'm kind of missing the last couple here, but there's a lot out there. So we're going to have all this kind of community engagement going on before we have the formal draft plan comment period, which is the thing that people tend to kind of remember and focus on. So there'll be all these opportunities to review messaging and information, and take this information that we're sharing with you on the slides as an opportunity to kind of look at what we're considering key messages around transportation demand management. And you can kind of help us inform what we're going to be developing and writing for that draft in April. Is there another slide for me, Aaron, on this, or is this the last of them?
No, I think you're temporarily off the hook. Yeah, I will take the next slide. Thank you, Gil. So I know all of you are most interested probably in the TDM content that's in this existing, or this current transportation system report. So what we're going to do is do a quick overview of kind of what data sources we've used and what findings we have that will go in the report, and hopefully hear from you all if you think there are more things we could be talking about, or have feedback on the findings we've identified. So just as a quick overview, I know some folks were at our August meeting and this is familiar, and even weighed in on the development of the regional TDM inventory questions, but wanted to do some level setting so we're all on the same page starting out. So for the current regional transportation plan, which was adopted in 2022, we did our first ever regional TDM inventory. So that data collection kind of took place 2019, 2020, trying to really identify programs in the region. I think we learned a lot through that process and really appreciated stakeholders kind of explaining to us the challenges of making some of the aspects of TDM really quantifiable. So we've now done an update to that inventory. So this was released in the fall of 2023. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we found from that inventory, but that's kind of our key data source at this point. Also, to provide a little bit more context about maybe some examples of programs or other commute changes to commute behavior and overall travel behavior, we did also weave in some findings from the 2023 Regional Household Travel Survey, which there's a presentation on the website where some folks from our data team shared those findings at our August meeting. So there's a couple of those data points woven into this section, as well as we have been reviewing everyone's local CTR plans. And so that's been a great source for really kind of understanding in more detail how some of your programs work, and being able to potentially add some examples into this report. I also wanted to highlight a key data source from the past has been the CTR employee survey data. Given the revamp of the survey, and sort of the shift in the timing of that. And we know people are still working on that 2023 to 2025 survey cycle. So our hope is to be able to use that data once that's available at the end of the fiscal year this summer, to also kind of work that into the current transportation system summary that's in the final plan. But for this April report, just acknowledging that hasn't all been completed yet. That won't be included yet. So what we really wanted to do with all of you in the virtual room today was dig into a little bit of what we learned from the TDM inventory, and also kind of what we didn't. So we know the timing of this was really challenging, as many folks are working on CTR plans, and recognizing there's a lot of staffing limitations, but we did send this out to all 82 of our PSRC member jurisdictions, as well as the transit agencies, the TMAs, and then a couple of major employer partners that have participated in the past. I think UW was one of those, as well as HopeLink. And we got 61 responses. And one of the first questions, acknowledging that when we sent this out to every jurisdiction, there's a lot of small jurisdictions in our region that maybe don't have a lot of resources or capacity to dedicate to TDM, and certainly are not CTR affected. That was kind of the initial question was, does your jurisdiction do TDM? Yes or no? If you said yes, then there were many other questions for you to respond to. And if you said no, that was kind of the end of the survey. So of those 61 responses, only 32 said, yes, we are involved in implementing, funding TDM, and answered the rest of the questions. So that's kind of the, I'm going to call it a sample size. I think the intent was this would be more of a census that captured everyone, but we know there are more implementers of TDM probably than those 32 responses, but we did several extensions to try to get feedback on this, and still didn't hear from some folks. So this is kind of the data set that we have to work with. Yeah, Gil, was there anything you wanted to add on this slide?
No, I mean, I think maybe, Aaron, I just realized, probably just for clarification, our definition of TDM might be good just to kind of stay, and maybe I'll just kind of sum it up of like, really, it's not the modes themselves, just so that anybody that's new with us, I think there were some newer names that we I have talked about the education incentives, programs that kind of encourage people to shift modes and try to, use transit or bike to their destinations and things like that. Those are what we're considering TDM for purposes of what PSRC talks about. And again, I think maybe as Aaron was pointing out, we do think there's others, but I think sometimes the definition and kind of what is TDM makes it a little bit hard for people to understand and really like engage. So that I think is part reflected here.
Thanks, Gil. And then this is sort of a summary of the ones that are kind of grayed out are the ones that responded. So the white are the ones that are what you might call missing. I know I did hear feedback, like Debbie, I know you mentioned that the Pierce County response captured a lot of the programming for the CTR affected jurisdictions. The only reason that some of these are still on the list, and I think it's a similar case in Snohomish. I know Community Transit does a lot of work with the CTR affected jurisdictions, but the big takeaway was we wanted to be sure if there were other local TDM programs outside of CTR that we were capturing those here. And so that was kind of the goal of getting a response from every jurisdiction. Even if it kind of said, we just do the required CTR and we contract with the county or a transit agency to do that. So again, we do have some really helpful background from several of you that gives some context to this. But yeah, this is just, if you're curious, did I respond to that or did someone from my organization? Those that are kind of grayed out are the 61 responses that we have. There were also a couple jurisdictions where we got responses from one or two, like 2 employees, but they were pretty consistent. So we appreciated the coverage there. Before maybe jumping into what we found from the inventory, maybe I'll pause with the context Gil gave and acknowledging there are some newer folks in the room. Does anybody have any questions about the inventory? I am going to kind of go through what some of the questions were that we learned from it. But any questions or comments before I forge ahead?
Hey, Aaron, this is Sherman from Bothell. And I noticed that we were highlighted white. So that means that we did not respond. Is that what I understood you to say? And
Yeah.
so,
And that might have been, I think a challenge we had, let me figure out where you are. Yeah.
yeah, we're under King there, but
Yeah. So, and I guess I should have mentioned that as well. A thing I think we've noticed, is I'm not sure, Sherman, you were the person that maybe got this email when we were doing this. That's very, very possible.
that's kind of wondering what I'm wondering is like, who is the contact that you have for this? Because we do have a TDM. We are working on a TDM element for our regional growth center, and we did obviously the CTR. So, I was just curious. So it was just a quick question. You don't have to, we could talk offline on this.
And maybe for everyone, Aaron, I think even though it's late and we've, like she said, we had this open for over a year and we're really struggling with responses. If anyone's here, like Sherman or others, we're okay to take responses, right? And even if it's a phone call, like I think some people were having trouble like navigating the survey. Is that true, Aaron? We would take a response even if it's late. Okay.
Yeah. So perhaps I think we've got some items we're going to send out to the attendees and then the rest of our contact list for folks who weren't here today. So I will include the survey link and it is still active. So yeah, I can include some more detail in the email, but if maybe, you're in the room today and thinking, I never saw this email, or you're remembering like, oh no, that slipped through the cracks. We will still accept responses if you want to be sure that your programs are kind of rolled into what we are sharing in the plan. So thank you for bringing that up, Sherman. And yeah, I do think that's an ongoing challenge. I know there were a few jurisdictions where I got bounced around to a few different folks, and definitely a couple where our contacts from the last inventory are no longer there or have switched jobs. And so yeah, keeping track of everybody in the TDM space it's always hard, but appreciate you highlighting that, Sherman. Anybody else have any comments or questions? Okay. So we asked a lot of questions in the inventory, which, as Gil said, I think made completing it challenging for some of our partners, and that was definitely not our intent, but really trying to learn as much as we can about programs that, again, can sometimes seem elusive. So what we're sharing here is kind of the things that were the most complete out of those 31 responses that said yes, or 32 that said yes, we're involved in TDM. But you might, if you're thinking back, think, oh, I answered a lot more questions than that. But we did have some issues with consistency on some of those, and didn't feel that there was sort of enough data for it to really be a finding, or for us to really be able to successfully summarize it. So we'll dig into that more in the later slides. But one I think that was relatively straightforward was we asked what audiences you engage with in your TDM, and that being inclusive of CTR activities. I also would maybe flag, we're using the term TDM activities, which, as Gil mentioned, I think maybe threw some people, so maybe it was not a good idea. But some feedback as we analyzed the initial inventory back in 2020, 2021, was we were measuring it, the unit of measurement was a TDM program. And what we learned there was that people were interpreting that really differently. Some folks broke out, here's every single like TDM campaign that we've done. We had a really big time frame there of 2015 to 2019. And so some jurisdictions had like 8 or 9 programs listed, and others kind of grouped all of their things together and said, we have CTR and we have other TDM, and those are our 2 programs. And so that felt really inaccurate when we were trying to kind of show the concentration of TDM activity in different parts of the region. So that's kind of why we shifted more to just thinking, you know, you as a jurisdiction or an organization, of all of the TDM work you do, we're trying to ask these broad questions. So definitely as we go, if folks have feedback on this, how we did this time, we definitely welcome that. But we tried to kind of iterate on last time and make some changes. So what we learned is that I think commuters and employers, or ETCs, are still, if you kind of combine those two, are still the largest audience. That's sort of the orange and the green bar here. But we are seeing a number of respondents, 21 of the 32 said all people in their jurisdiction or region are the audience. And so I think that was really encouraging news to look to how broader TDM outside of just the CTR program is, I think, growing in the region. Again, because we asked these questions a little bit differently last time. I don't know that there's a sort of statistically sound way to compare the two, but that was kind of the finding that we took away from this, as well as seeing that schools and specific corridors are not too far behind as sort of other TDM audiences. And then in that other category, this was sort of a summary of the initial responses. As we kind of read, some people provided a little more detail in the other category. Some of those we were able to kind of regroup into, many of them we kind of shifted over into all people in my jurisdiction. But yeah, so that's kind of what we're finding on this, and that would be something we're sharing in the report, just noting that given that CTR funding is still a major source of TDM funding in the region, commuters, employers, ETCs are definitely big audiences. And I think in resource constrained areas, kind of addressing those first, if there aren't other resources to do broader TDM, then sometimes that isn't happening. But we are seeing more jurisdictions doing that, I think, than in the past. Does anybody have any feedback? Or I guess the question we're posing is, does that sound right, feel right based on all of your experiences as implementers? Are we comfortable putting that sort of in the report? Maybe that kind of what I just said about the prevalence of commuter and employer-focused programs, but also sort of a growing interest as resources are available in broader TDM. Okay, I'm going to interpret the silence to mean that no one disagrees with that. And Gil, hopefully if anybody writes anything in the Q&A,
I'll let you know. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I was saying I'm not looking at that at the same time. So, okay, well, I will forge ahead. The other thing that we wanted to do this time was look at the funding of TDM. I think, especially in a very resource constrained state and federal environment right now, there's a lot of value in being able to kind of demonstrate a return on investment. So what we were trying to do with the inventory this year was total up kind of all of the funding, all of the money that's invested in TDM, and then be able to measure the outcomes to kind of show for this investment, this is what we're seeing. This is the impact that it's having. I think it probably won't surprise anybody that that's a difficult task that we've definitely wrestled with through the last couple of regional transportation plans. And so I think maybe we're getting closer, but maybe not quite to the point that we can draw that strong connection we wanted to. But people did do a very good job of completing the funding section, so really appreciate that. This was looking at the calendar year 2022, which we acknowledge a lot of folks had to do some estimations, kind of translating fiscal year or a biennium of funding into calendar year 2022. So in the report, we've kind of asterisked this $7.5 million figure with some notes about that, you know, again, there are some approximations that are made here. But I think a big question that I wanted to ask, an assumption I struggled with as I was totaling together all of those responses was, and this maybe gets back to our definition of TDM. Some folks, like I know a couple of our transit agencies kind of shared, like, here is our marketing budget for basically marketing transit. And some of those were really big numbers, like especially coming from Sound Transit. That's a regional service, so a much bigger number. And so what I did in this initial $7.5 million is I used half of that, acknowledging that maybe some of those things fall into a TDM category and other things maybe wouldn't. But that's really what we want feedback from all of you on, is how broadly do we want to consider TDM in this plan, and is that a good methodology, or should I be adding in that full figure, which would boost this up, I think, more in the 9 million figure. So would love feedback on this from all of you, so we can kind of feel confident that you're comfortable with what we put in the report.
And I'll just add in, I mean, and so those who have kind of been with us for a while know that we did try to do this more than 4 years ago now, I think it was. And it was kind of it really was a difficult thing to try to address and assess because there is the CTR funding that is kind of the base of TDM in our region and the state, but then also this additional programs and additional activities that locally developed, grant funded, other kinds of funding sources. And that was, we just decided not to use that because it was like all across, it was different funding, different time periods. It was really kind of a scattershot approach. This time, I think, as Aaron was noting, we got like a sampling, 32 responses out of the total, who gave us this amount. And Aaron has talked about, she's kind of applied some kind of methodology there. But it also just tells me that we might need to, as complicated as this survey was, this is really a complicated thing to really get into. What is funding TDM versus not funding TDM? And so I don't know. I'm a little bit wary of what we have here, and really am interested in kind of, as Aaron was saying, interested in this group's feedback on that, whether we should be using full marketing budgets from transit agencies or not, whether we should be applying some kind of like portion, or how do we dig into that? But anyhow, yeah. This is what we got out of this current inventorying exercise.
I can just add to that from kind of implementer hat of past and a little current for community transit. Like when I think of our overall marketing budget, I wouldn't apply that all to TDM. Like, even though when we think about CTR, TDM, we think about, oh yeah, we have a chance to go out and market all of our products and services that we're advertising in the community through our employers and residential programs and school programs. But for this specific exercise, I would think it'd be more accurate to either through the funding exercise, if you can't like intentionally figure out what are like specific dollars spent to those kind of categories you were showing on the previous slide, right? Employer and school in general, that you apply like a percentage, kind of like I think what you were saying, Aaron. Like I probably wouldn't even do 50% of ours, like because we just have a big budget. But yeah, I think if you applied everything, like that would overinflate, and I think would not. We don't want to present a number publicly that shows like, wow, TDM has plenty of money, like to do things, and this is the result of what they're doing, and it hurts it as if we want to lobby for more money, if we need more money. So that's just speaking from like one perspective from a transit agency. I would love to hear if other transit agencies kind of feel the same, or just jurisdictions in general. But yeah, like I wouldn't want to apply like sole marketing budgets because that encompasses a lot of other things that I don't think necessarily fit into the, like this kind of specific TDM inventory task.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. That's really helpful. And maybe what we could do too for some of these, we could do a little bit of follow-up to try to figure out what the right percentage is, because it might be a little bit different depending on the agency. So that might be a little more accurate than my kind of blanket 50%, to hopefully hone in on this number a little bit more. And I do think too, we could also provide some of these things are, I think, more clear cut, like, you know, the CTR funds. I feel like that's very clearly connected to TDM and CTR implementation. But yeah, maybe digging into some of those that were broader budget items might help this number feel a little more accurate.
And I don't remember, I didn't participate from our agency in this inventory. I have in prior years. I don't remember how extensive the financial part is. So maybe these numbers are from 22. So maybe there is a way that we might want to update it a little bit in general. Again, I don't want to put more work on people's plates or on you guys to have to like get all the information and recalculate it. But if there is opportunity to fine tune through these kind of outreach months and engagement months to do that work, I think that could be valuable.
Yeah, thank you.
And maybe just adding in, thanks for the feedback, Jennifer. Guys, maybe one thing to do is maybe we don't put it in the draft that goes out in April. Maybe there's not a number in there, but maybe more of a qualitative description about what we've been surveying and kind of the things we've come across, or the types of things while we work on over the year. Because I would hate to put out a number. I guess that's part of my worry. We have a number that's like either wildly wrong or whatever, right? And for whatever reason. I mean, but yet we've tried this, and maybe we can talk about what we've tried and kind of what kinds of things we're seeing in there qualitatively, maybe, and then kind of work through to see if we can kind of come up with a number by the time this is finalized. So I guess is the suggestion I'll put out there.
Sometimes it's harder to correct and explain why it's different than to publish something in a draft form that doesn't have all the quantitative and say we're working on pulling that together through the engagement process, and that'll be part of the final version. I kind of agree with that philosophy in other planning documents, so I would support that.
Thank you, Jennifer. Does anybody else, a transit agency or otherwise, have any thoughts on this? I think kind of, yeah, from what Gil and I talked about internally and hearing from Jennifer just then, I think we're maybe leaning toward not putting this number in the current system report and doing a little more investigation to fine tune it. So definitely I'll still provide sort of a footnote that explains what exactly went into the number in the final version. But that way, I think we can get to a number we're a little more confident in with a little more outreach and fine tuning. So that's, I think that the takeaway, unless we hear from other folks with differing opinions.
Hi, Erin. This is Greta from King County Metro. Just one thing to consider as well, and I agree with what I'm hearing, is if you surveyed transit agencies, like I don't know if King County Metro, I don't know if we were surveyed, probably we were. We might have provided an amount, and some of that funding that would go into that number for us is actually given to cities as subrecipients of our grants. And so then if a city responds and says our TDM budget was X amount of dollars, some of that I actually might end up looking like it was double counted if Metro's providing a number, for example, and then the city is providing another number that's actually from the same budget or the same grant, that then we're funneling down to the jurisdiction. So that's also something to consider. And I don't know if there's a way for you to look into that based on who responded, but just something to think about as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great thing to highlight. Thank you, Greta. So we did try, again, this might have backfired on us and made the survey a little intimidating, but we did try to clarify in the financial questions, is this money that you are directly spending on implementing TDM to try to avoid that double counting? So I think we had a note in there that said, please exclude money that you pass along to like it should kind of end up with like the final spender of the money is kind of, I think, I don't remember our exact phrasing, but that was kind of what we were trying to get at, in the hopes that we weren't double counting money that was coming, passing through like a county or a transit agency, but sort of the final implementer was reporting it to try to avoid the double counting. But what we might do in this bit of outreach is, I was trying to kind of check across some numbers. The CTR one seemed like an easier one because I can actually like get that number from the state and know how much was allocated to do some double checking to make sure things weren't double counted. So I don't know that we'll ever get it perfect, but maybe through a little bit of follow-up, we could also just double check a couple of those things to make sure, because again, there was a lot of information in the survey and we did our best to communicate what I just said, but as you saw, I struggled to even say it here in the meeting. So that might not have come through and people might have interpreted the questions differently. So I think that's another important thing to follow up on, Greta. So thank you.
Aaron and Gil, this is Christine from Metro as well. I think the story we're trying to tell here, in addition to what you've already described, is the sources of funding, but I'm also curious to learn more about, and I'm sure this is on a lot of folks' minds right now, in terms of it's good to know what's funded at the local level, but what is also the grant exposure. And I'm also curious to start thinking about TDM, and this is an observation, community engagement, for example, at the front end of a project or a program or infrastructure investments is often funded by the capital side of the house. And TDM then kind of comes at the end. Once you've implemented, you have service, you're trying to encourage people to use that service. So I've found it that TDM often lands in a limbo area where it's not a one-off project. It's not as flashy. There's no ribbon cutting. It's an ongoing effort that's really important to sustain, and or to have big spikes in investments to do TDM programming when there's new services or new investments in capital improvement. And I'm curious to know what stage of the programming also is funding TDM. Sometimes TDM gets its own funding just for TDM, but as you know yourselves, we're often competing in that CMAQ type environment against capital projects for just TDM or operating programming. And or should TDM really be as integrated in capital delivery, just like community engagement, in that last bookend step of delivery of a new regional investment or a new capital investment? So that's just something I've observed. Or could there be more partnerships between different teams or roles within a project where TDM as a program, we come with some grant funds, et cetera, but also as we do at Metro, the marketing team complements some of the grant funds we get, and or sometimes we partner with the capital folks within our team and they reserve some capital improvement funds to support a opening TDM related campaign. So I just think there's a broader, almost policy question of where does TDM really fall in terms of the best way to fund ongoing and or important spikes in TDM programming in sync with capital investments and new services coming online.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. And that is another angle, maybe similar to, yeah, like we wouldn't want to include an entire capital projects budget in this, but yeah, it can be hard to kind of siphon off like which part of that went to TDM. But that's maybe another area similar to the marketing budget, where we need to kind of figure out if there's little bits of money going toward TDM. But I mean, and maybe that is what you just said is sort of a finding in itself that it does get slotted in at different parts in the process, and the amount of money that goes toward this can really vary from project to project. And so it does sometimes feel like a bit of a piecemeal of trying to get a little scrap of funding from here and a little scrap from here. And then, you know, for some grants, trying to get some local match dollars so you can get the grant. So yeah, I do think maybe not being an implementer myself, but hearing from all of you today and in the past, your challenges are reflected in the challenge of us collecting this information, because it is, I think it does really, it looks different for every jurisdiction, every implementer, and oftentimes is coming from a little bit of money from a lot of sources, rather than a really straightforward few grant programs. So yeah, I'm not sure the extent to which trying to somewhat minimize follow-up and maybe not introduce a whole new question that goes to everybody that was surveyed, kind of a thing. But maybe as we do some of these financial follow-ups, we can ask those questions just to, again, see, here's what you shared with us in the initial survey. Did you consider X, Y, and Z? Also looking at the number you gave, is that reflective of what you estimate to be a portion of your marketing budget? Was that the whole marketing budget? What feels right for your agency? Maybe we can ask that as an additional question as we're feeling that out.
And Aaron, I would just say that the thing that Christine was telling us about this area, like often landing in a limbo area and kind of like it's just not very clear. That could be part of the narrative we have in this about, like, this is existing system, right? An existing state for TDM. So I think that could be also just part of the story, right? So just my 2 cents on that too. And something we need to kind of figure out. So should we move on to the next one?
Yeah, I was going to say, if no one else has any feedback, and if you think of something as we go along, yeah, there will be time later. So as I mentioned, kind of the theory with this inventory was we were trying to kind of say what's being invested in TDM and then what are the outcomes that we're seeing. And so there were a couple questions toward the end of the survey that asked, how do you measure the effectiveness or the impact of your TDM programs? And then asked folks to send us the data that went with that. And so I know we did get that for a couple of responses, but I think it was only maybe 3 or 4. So we didn't come in with a clear strategy of how we were going to compare apples and oranges with these different measures. But we were hoping to kind of get all of the data and be able to say it was this many people for you know, these implementers. It was these drive alone trips not taken or miles not traveled for these implementers, trying to kind of summarize it as best we could. But again, with only having a couple jurisdiction and agency data sets, didn't really feel comfortable presenting a finding from just a couple spots in the region. But I do think this highlighted when we asked, how do you measure the effectiveness, that there is a variety throughout the region, and the type of TDM program might determine the appropriate measure. And so I think it's maybe a conversation worth having moving forward. Is there a way to do this simply? And if not, is it worth it? Again, I think I don't want to say position, but our perspective at PSRC has always been that this is useful both for us to be able to understand TDM in the current system and the role it plays, but also for all of you as implementers to be able to really demonstrate the value in a quantitative way. But I think I would love to hear some feedback from folks, because I do think this would be a pretty big effort to try to come up with consistent measures for a variety of programs throughout the region. And given how difficult it was to get folks to respond to the survey, I'm also aware that maybe getting everybody on board and reporting that information or sharing it with us is also a challenge. So Gil, I don't know if there were other things you wanted to mention, but I think I just wanted to kind of cover, we asked this question. And so you know, I think the talking point or the item that we would put in the report at this point is along the lines of there's many ways to measure it. It depends on the program. And because of that, and because of the diversity of programs and implementers, it's difficult. We don't have one number that says this is the impact of TDM.
Yeah, and I guess I would just add in, yeah, that's this slide and the previous slide are kind of some of the ones that when I started working in the TDM area back in 2018 here at PSRC, those were the things we were hearing, and we still hear from the board members sometimes about, you know, always kind of here that there needs to be more money put to TDM, but really what is that money going to, and how much money is there now, and all. So they ask these questions and they can't get answers, right? So they don't know. Board members and others who are kind of in these places where, you know, we talk about grant funding and abilities to get, you know, more into TDM, and we all recognize kind of intuitively the importance of this, but when we can't really measure effectiveness across a region or whatever, and in part it's that there's no one. PSRC is not the TDM implementer, you know, superpower, or we don't have county by county. It's very kind of balkanized and localized, right? So everybody is, and that's why you see these kind of charts and the difficulty of looking at the amount of money being spent on this in the past slide. But these are really, in my opinion, based upon kind of what I've heard from elected officials and others, these are really important things for us to get a handle on. So I see kind of like non-drive alone of some sort, whether it be trips taken or not taken, or miles not miles not taken from drive alone trips. You know, something along those lines. I think we probably need to kind of like come together, and maybe that's a call to action, because we can't. There's obviously nothing right here, and we'll talk shortly about a challenge we'll have in developing a regional CTR element to our plan, because we have such a variety of implementers and a variety of ways of measuring things. But this is just one of the challenges, and I think we really do. I mean, a call to action, I would say, is to kind of like, we're not to that point yet in our planning, but in my mind, I'm thinking we're going to need to call to action on something about coming together around a common TDM effectiveness measure in our region. So anyhow, just my thoughts on that, and be curious to know what people think.
Gil, this is Christine again at King County Metro. We're having that same call to action on this measuring effectiveness and being able to tell our story of the outcomes, not just the what we're doing, but what are we getting for the investment in our team and our time and in these grant funds. I totally agree with you that there should be a quote unquote standard way of capturing this story across our agencies. I think that would help all of us advocate for one another and as a collective group who do this type of work in the region, not just by jurisdiction, to tell that story in a compelling way. And as we all know, TDM is much more than the numbers. So the qualitative side of the data and the storytelling in terms of capacity building within the community to ensure folks think of transit first and sustainable trips first instead of their single occupancy vehicle, and that culture shift. So yes, I agree with you. I think that's mostly what I'm trying to say.
But don't lose the narrative, right? Don't lose the story. Is how
yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And also the storytelling that TDM gets to tell about how we have connected people to trips and mobility, new types of trips options and mobility options, and how that translates into new opportunities for that individual or for that community is an incredibly compelling part of that answer to an elected official, and hard to deny. And yes, there's not a number for that, but we have to be able to tell both sides of that data story.
And I'll say this just is something that we also hear for specialized transportation, what we call that, with the mobility services for older adults, people with disabilities, and others. And they do a really good job of telling stories. But we also hear that same thing on that end too. It's like a really great story about somebody's grandmother getting transportation to her medical appointment. But then we still hear how many grandmothers are getting that transportation. So I think we're also struggling with this a little bit. We don't want to lose the story. It sounds like a very similar message here, but we also need to kind of like do a little bit more quantification, a little bit more like what is the effectiveness like measures that we can kind of look at that really tell that story about what are you kind of anyhow. I think I'm just kind of like noting a parallel with another.
I think another piece of why it's difficult to capture is because TDM generally works at that individual level, and it's so hard to capture the numbers at that one-to-one or individual level. You really do need to work with and through community organizations, through major employers to capture the breadth and depth of the reach of our programming in order to tell that data story. That's just an observation that an experience that we've had at Metro as well.
I think Jennifer has her.
Yeah, I'll just add, those are all really good points. And this is like the data discussion we've struggled with for like decades, right? Since pretty much we've started wanting to measure effectiveness and tell the story. And I think as programs have matured and as we all as implementers have gotten, I think, better and savvier at collecting data, both quantitatively and then qualitatively selling the narrative and telling the story, it would be, if we have time and space in this kind of engagement process, for us to maybe come back together and have a very data specific conversation. Gil, maybe kind of how you're thinking about it is, I can't remember the last time we sat in a room and talked about that. Like, we probably haven't for many years, like really cohesively, like sat down and looked at, okay, here are the key metrics of how each agency is collecting information, because we all are doing that. We're all telling it to our stakeholders, we're all telling it to our senior leadership, we're telling it to our communities. And are there any commonalities in that would make it easy to roll up, right? Like, I don't know if we have intentionally had that conversation in a while. So I think there could be some value to that, because this is always the challenge we have, is how do we show TDM in a quantitative way that can kind of hold some similar weight to how other programs and projects are looked at. So I would champion having that conversation again.
Yeah, just kind of summarizing what you're saying, Jennifer. It sounds like a good idea, but we need to have some more in-depth engagement on that and really kind of like digging into it a little bit more to see if we're going to go call to action to what, and it's kind of what I'm hearing you say, right? So to kind of really dig into that a little bit, and maybe we can develop, like we have here for the existing system, what Aaron is showing here, lots of different ways. And can we come out of this in terms of the next few months as we're developing, what is the future going to look like? In the future, we could be saying, oh, we're going to come around, what are we going to come around? We're going to come around measuring effectiveness, and what would that be? So I'm hearing you say kind of like bringing together people to kind of look at the different, a little bit more detail about what was embedded in this response and what would be an easier lift for the group or for implementers throughout the region to kind of do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And yeah, maybe people could even get a little homework assignment ahead of time. That's like, tell the 3 to 5 ways that you like quantitatively are collecting data right now. And that would give you guys a sense of just a little bit of a baseline, even before the conversation starts. That might be helpful. That's just an idea. Because we're all doing this, right? So it's just, is there any common thread in how we're doing it that would be effective for this exercise?
Okay.
I second what Jennifer is suggesting, and the homework piece, so we come prepared and even can visualize what's on the table and then narrow down what might be some consistent measures. At minimum, all programs can be measuring. And just to acknowledge, at Metro, we have a lot of different types and sizes and feels of TDM programming, and it's even difficult to capture consistent metrics across the different types and sizes within our own agency and in our own program. So this is a tough one to break, but we can do it if we spend that intentional time on it. And I think it would benefit all of us, especially in light of likely funding challenges coming at us into the future and advocating for ourselves.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I was just checking, that was the last slide. So I know we're kind of behind our time, but I think we've definitely gotten some really good feedback on how to proceed. And maybe being a little bit cautious as we put this report for April, the current transportation system report. Obviously want to include TDM and really introduce the topic and share what we do feel we know, but we'll maybe be careful not to make assertions on some of these items that need a little more follow-up or digging in a little deeper. With that, I think do want to move on to the next topic.
Yes, I think I'm taking this one, Aaron.
Yeah.
And I think, we're moving towards the CTR planning work. I have a slide here, I think, on the regional commute trip reduction plan that we're required to do as the regional transportation planning organization for this region. And I think what the slide Aaron has here is kind of listing out the requirements for this. I think you've all seen this for your local CTR plans. We are planning, as we've mentioned in the past, we are planning to incorporate this requirement into our regional transportation plan. We I'll just say kind of, and I think I've said this in the past to these groups, so apologies for the repetition, but when I first started here, there were these things where people were bringing in different kind of organizations were asking for plans, and there were different things coming off cycle, and it was really confusing our board and elected officials, and what is this and what is that? So we kind of pull this all together into this large complex plan that we're doing a 4-year cycle. It's a pretty frequent cycle, as I say, like we're always working on something long range plan ways. And so putting things off the cycle is a really additional workload and kind of takes away from other things. So long story short, we are doing this as part of our regional transportation plan, even though you all have different deadlines there. We did receive an extension from the state CTR board, the TDM technical committee, to align our regional plan with our regional transportation plan. I kind of think it should have been that way to begin with, that we should have those in there, but we did get that permission to do that. We are working on that. This is what you're seeing earlier as part of what we're doing on that. We basically a lot of what we do in a regional entity is to roll up what we see in the locals. We have examples of that. I work in the transit field most of the time here, and so we have 9 agencies providing various forms of public transit in our region. And we rather than PSOC coming in and saying you all keep your transit assets in this certain condition, we roll up what the agencies are doing. You all are doing really good work. Why should we go in and say, unless our board tells us to? But to date, they want to reflect what work is going on in the region. So our plan on this has been to kind of really strategies being based upon what we're learning from local CTR plans. And so it's been a really helpful exercise for us to start seeing those local CTR plans coming in and being able to kind of develop and identify what that is, and us kind of developing a way as part of our regional transportation plan that we're just talking about. How are we going to account for that roll up of local CTR into our region, and how will that be encompassed in our plan? And then we are doing our regional transportation plan engagement. We are tracking and summarizing that in the plan. That includes our plan is a really, even though there's a CTR requirement, it really is kind of writ large a TDM plan as we look at pricing the system and the effects of things like road usage charge or whatever else is coming on there. We have system tolls and various types of options and opportunities, most of which involve some level of pricing. And you can really see the effects in the modeling and the work as we test that on current conditions and current systems and look out to the future. The effects of that are really powerful. So those are TDM strategies as well on a regional level outside of the local programs. So we do kind of like incorporate that. We know that there has to be an element of looking at those large employers with peak periods. So that is a plan for us to make sure that we're touching on them and addressing them. We are, like I said, going to address this whole list of requirements. I just wanted to touch on one part in particular where we do have the regional it's kind of the regional performance. Is that, Aaron, will you help me with this? It's called the CTR performance target, right?
Yeah.
Is that yeah. And so you're all required to do CTR performance targets, and there was 4 different ways that you could do this in the local plans. I think as we've been reviewing it, and Aaron is much closer to this than I am, we've seen all 4 of those, and we've seen a couple of variations on option 2 on that. So that I think is going to just kind of giving a little heads up. I think one of our PSAs here is we're going to struggle a bit with this, at least our typical thing of rolling up what the locals do into a regional CTR performance target. So we will probably be working with, as part of we were hearing kind of a call to engage you on the quantitative like kind of how we measure effectiveness, but I also think we're going to be engaging in some way, shape, or form on how are we going to develop our regional CTR performance targets and or a TDM performance target that encompasses CTR as well. Just so folks know and remember, we do, as I mentioned, kind of alluded to earlier, we do see our our planning is really, you know, CTR is only a piece of that. We do want to have TDM writ large, and some of the strategies and work and call to action from the current regional transportation plan that was adopted in 2022 was to expand TDM much broader and larger than the commute trip reduction law. So we consider that kind of a basis, but a kind of something that needs to be really expanded upon and all encompassed. I don't have anything else on this. Aaron, is there something I missed from kind of what we're talking about on this? I think more to come is more or less what I'm saying, and I just wanted to kind of highlight that some areas in particular will probably be looking to you for in the future. I think some of the other things, if I want to say, I think are going to be things that Aaron's going to say about local CTR plans and our review of that. Are there any questions before moving on to local CTR? I don't see any, so maybe just hop into the local work.
Yeah, so as Gil mentioned, in that vein, we want to thank everybody for their hard work. I know not everyone in the meeting today, but many of you worked on local CTR plans for 2025 to 2029. As of yesterday, we've received 39 of the 40 plans for CTR affected jurisdictions in the region. So want to thank you all for your hard work on that. 33 of those have already been reviewed by us and then approved by the TDM Technical Committee and are in that local adoption process phase, but there are still kind of these lingering handful. So we know some of these are on the agenda for the April TDM Technical Committee meeting. So yeah, doing our best to move plans through our review. I know there have been a couple where we've done a concurrent review with WashDOT just to keep things moving. But just want to provide that sort of the update piece. And then again, acknowledging we have some limited time, we did just want to give some space for folks to provide any feedback on developing the local CTR plan. Our regional review process, was that helpful? I mean, it was obviously required, but you know, were the comments helpful, or was the process helpful, or you know, any feedback folks want to give, having just gone through putting quite a bit of work into these local CTR plans.
This is Lindsay from Kitsap Transit.
Lindsay.
I just wanted to say that I found it helpful, your guys' reviews. I thought I turned my camera on. There we go. Oh. There we go.
We can see you.
So I found your comments helpful, especially because, you know, I struggled with it being my first time. So I was definitely able to go back and kind of, you know, fine tune some things based on what you guys gave us feedback. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, Lindsay. That's good to hear. Well, maybe we'll also put a little reminder when we do our follow-up email that please feel free to share other feedback with us. You know, yeah, we want this to be a space where all the implementers in the region, if there are shared concerns or shared successes, that we can talk about those. So yeah, Sherman.
I'll just say that what worked for us and appreciate a lot is for Community Transit being our administrator and all of Snohomish County administrators. I think the effort that they put in to coordinate all of us, pulling out a template for our plans, and kind of just being a quick resource for us for questions and everything like that. It was tremendous to help us, I think, put a good plan together that was comprehensive. And I just want to just acknowledge that for those guys, that they did it. Philip and everybody up there did a really good job.
Thank you, Sherman. Yeah, good work, Community Transit. And yeah, I think in that case and in others, people were very communicative with us for this process. So we really appreciated that. So thank you. It's nice to highlight the wins. I think our last item. Okay, so this, again, if you've thought of any comments on anything we've talked about, we are now to kind of the last chunk of the meeting. So please feel free to bring those up now. But yeah, our goals today really were to kind of share where we're at with the regional transportation plan development, that this report is coming, kind of have a touch point with all of you before putting some text into that plan, as well as kind of giving a preview of what's coming for the rest of the year, which is that we plan on holding at least one more meeting, and based on some feedback today, it might be 2 meetings ahead of the draft regional transportation plan being released. Again, really wanting to dig into making sure everybody's comfortable with the regional performance target. Part A being figuring out how setting that target, a methodology that feels appropriate, but then also being able to kind of share that final number before it's in a draft plan, as well as kind of doing some of that future planning work on sort of goals or things we want to highlight that yeah, we'll go into this plan. So we'll work on maybe kind of, I think in 2024, we had like an engagement plan where we kind of highlighted a couple dates and key touch points. And so we'll work on pulling that together to share with all of you. But definitely, I think we're thinking this summer, starting that conversation and potentially maybe sooner on the performance measures and how we want to go about that. But yeah, the only other item is just if there are questions on anything we covered today, the plan moving forward, or other topics that you think need a regional conversation or just information you want to share, we want to give space for that. So that's kind of the purpose of the round table. So yeah, Gil, unless I've missed anything, I can be quiet for a few minutes and see if anybody has anything they want to discuss or share.
I just saw something, but that's actually Alexa's sending us she's put out some information there. So I don't see any questions yet. Oh, Jennifer, you have your camera on, maybe.
This may be, you probably already been asked this and people are already maybe thinking it too, but just thinking about funding, federal level policy, also that's happening. Anything you can share with us specific to, a lot of funding comes in through PSRC to be outsourced, right? At the regional and county levels. Anything specific we should know about that's, for projects that are already or awarded, like grants already awarded or upcoming funding cycles for either like CMAQ or regional mobility. I know we hear those questions. And so I'm just curious if there's anything that you could share with us now that we're kind of all together in this virtual space. That would be great.
I guess, I kind of feel like this is, it's been changing so much, I guess is what I would say. And I maybe encourage people, we do have our Robin Koski is our Director of Government Affairs and Communications here at PSRC, and she's been doing a lot of updates to at our board meetings. So if you know kind of our on our website, Puget Sound Regional Council website, there is a boards and committees tab. You can get on there, and you can we record those, and you can kind of even look back at them. She's been giving kind of an update. Particularly now because of the legislative session at Washington, but Washington State Legislative, sure. But she's also been giving federal updates. And Jennifer, we've been hearing lots of different things, right? We had I think a little bit of an issue with kind of STIP, the state TIP, when those kind of changes and things would happen, and that got resolved. Things are happening and changing so much. I don't think we have anything really to report today. But maybe, as we learn more, I just encourage people to, we could share like in a future meeting or a future kind of engagement. And if there's something TDM specific, that definitely I think would be something where we would try to work with Robin and kind of get that out to folks. But at this point, I don't think we have anything really specific. We're kind of trying to hang on and really see where things settle out on this work.
That's helpful, just knowing that there's a resource that if we wanted to go either back and look at stuff or kind of stay connected going forward, maybe if you are sending out a summary email, just shooting that link in there would be awesome for us. But yeah, we're all trying to stay connected and figure out what's the next thing. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other, I don't want to cut folks off, but I also want to be respectful of time. So any other comments, questions, topics? Okay. I think that's it then, Gil, unless we've missed anything. That's our.
Just a quick, Aaron, this is Sherman again. Just wondering if you can make this slideshow available or this recording to everybody.
That's our intent, right, Aaron? We're going to do that. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. They'll be posted to the website, and I'll add that to our sort of follow-up email list of things, so everyone has these slides.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all for your time today.
Oh, I thought of one other thing. Sorry. Gil, earlier you were talking about kind of a summary of the outreach schedule that's coming up for the engagement process. If that's something when it's pertinent or when it starts to happen, if you could share out with us, that would be helpful, because I think at each agency we may want to internally or externally promote that to some of our kind of external stakeholders. So
the different ways we're engaging for the RTPs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like where it's popping up in different community, like you had mentioned some public meetings and tabling, and just if there's an easy way to share that, whether that's just a link that's on your page and talks about it, and then we could pull from there. I just think the more we all can do to help encourage connecting people into the engagement process, that would be great. So however it's easiest for you to share that with us, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I will, I'll just say, I think we're setting this online engagement hub. That seems to be the new thing to do these days. We had something like that with our consultants hosting it for the Regional Safety Action Plan. I think we're planning to host our own version on our webpage for the Regional Transportation Plan. I think that's what we're doing it ourselves. So it's not quite ready yet, but in April, we think it will be. And so at that point, we're planning to have like schedules and kind of like upcoming engagement opportunities. So we'll share that out, make sure that you all get that, and it'd be a resource for you to come back to and look at. And Aaron, for our upcoming meetings on this, we want to make sure those things are in there too, right? So when we bring the TDM folks together again, we'll make sure that we have that all on there. So yeah, we'll share that out. Thanks for.
That's great. Thank you. And thank you for just organizing this and bringing us together this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Debbie, did you have something?
No, sorry.
All right. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
We're finished. I guess we're not adjourned, but we're finished. So thank you all for joining. Have a good afternoon.
You too. Bye-bye.